There was a time when getting into a stranger's car just wasn't something you did. It felt risky, off limits. But over the years, that changed. Ride sharing made it routine. You tap a button, you wait a few minutes, a car pulls up, you check the name, the photo, the license plate. Everything looks official, structured, safe. It's a system built on trust between people who have never met, and most of the time, it works exactly the way it's supposed to. For millions of people, it became part of everyday life, a normal way to get home, especially late at night, especially when you're by yourself. At first, this didn't look like someone disappearing. It looked like a delay, a night that ran long, a missed call, maybe her phone died, maybe she fell asleep as soon as she got home. Something simple, something you could explain away. But by mid-morning on March 29th, 2019, that uncertainty started to feel different. The kind of feeling where people stop assuming everything's fine and start realizing it might not be. March 29th started like any other Friday for Samantha Josephson. She woke up, checked her phone, and got ready for class at the University of South Carolina in Columbia. She walked across campus, sat through lectures, took notes, laughed with friends between classes, grabbed food at the student center. Graduation was only weeks away. She'd already been accepted into law school. She had plans lined up. She was looking ahead. Samantha wasn't someone who vanished without saying where she was going. She kept people updated. She was organized. She thought things through. That Friday night, she and a group of friends went out to Five Points, the busy nightlife area near campus. It was a spot students knew well. Bars, restaurants, music drifting out onto the sidewalks. Groups of people standing under streetlights, talking, taking pictures, enjoying the end of another week. It felt familiar, comfortable. As the night went on, they talked about finals, summer plans, and the law school she'd be starting soon. It was easy conversation, future-focused. Nothing felt off. Nothing felt urgent. Just friends spending time together in a place they'd been many times before. A little after 2 a.m., security cameras showed Samantha standing on Hardin Street, looking down at her phone. Investigators later confirmed she had requested a ride through Uber to go home. Samantha stood on the sidewalk, watching cars pass one after another. Headlights moved across the pavement. It was warm out. Late, but not deserted. Just another busy college town night winding down. She was waiting for her ride home. A black Chevrolet Impala pulled up nearby. Surveillance video from the area shows Samantha walking toward the car. She opens the front passenger door, gets in, and the car drives off. On camera, it looks completely normal. A student getting into what she believes is her ride after a night out. Nothing rushed, no hesitation, no sign that anything is wrong. But investigators would later confirm something critical. That car was not the Uber she had requested, and the driver was not affiliated with the company. At the time, no one knew that. When Samantha didn't make it home, her friends didn't immediately panic. They figured she might have gotten home late and gone straight to bed. Maybe her phone died. They sent texts. They called. They waited. By mid-morning, the waiting started to feel different. Her phone was still going straight to voicemail. Her roommates realized she hadn't come back to the apartment at all. That's when concern shifted into something more serious. Around noon on March 29th, her roommates reported her missing to campus police and contacted her parents. What had started as a quiet worry among friends quickly became an active search. Investigators began piecing together her last known movements using surveillance footage and digital records. They tracked timestamps, reviewed cameras, followed the trail as far as they could. The search moved fast. By that evening, local news stations were reporting that a University of South Carolina student was missing. Samantha's photo, smiling, bright, full of plans for the future, appeared on TV screens and across news websites. Friends shared her picture online. Classmates reposted updates. Strangers who had never met her passed along her information, hoping someone had seen something. Students gathered in common areas, talking in low voices. Flyers went up. Social media filled with messages asking for help, asking for answers. Then, later that same day, about 14 hours after she got into that car, hunters found her body in a wooded area in Clarendon County, nearly 70 miles from Columbia. Authorities confirmed she had been stabbed multiple times. The search that began that morning had already turned into something far worse. The news spread fast across campus. Students who had been out in the same area the night before were trying to process it. 5 Points wasn't some hidden corner of the city. It was where people went every weekend. And getting a rideshare home, that was the responsible choice. Samantha had done what most people would call the safe thing, and she still didn't make it back. Once investigators identified the black Chevrolet Impala, the case shifted quickly. This was no longer a search for a missing student. It was a homicide investigation. And before long, it was drawing attention far beyond Columbia. Because this wasn't just about one person making a wrong move. It raised bigger questions about trust, about safety, about how easy it is for someone to take advantage of a system that depends on people believing it works. As authorities worked to piece together what happened after that car left 5 Points, one question kept coming up. How did something as routine as calling for a ride turn into this? To understand how that night unfolded, and why Samantha was in that position in the first place, you have to look at who she was before March 28, 2019. You have to look at the life she was building. Long before her name was shared on national news, Samantha Josephson was just Sami to the people who loved her. At home, she was the younger daughter. To her friends, she was the one who followed through. To professors, she was serious about her work. She wasn't drifting through college, she had direction. Samantha grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey, in a close-knit suburban community where families knew each other and kids often grew up side by side. She was born on August 13, 1997, to Seymour and Marcy Josephson. She and her older sister, Sydney, were raised in a home where education mattered and independence was encouraged. Her father, Seymour, worked as a regional sales manager at Sonify Solutions. Her mother, Marcy, stayed deeply involved in her daughters' lives, cheering them on, staying present for the everyday moments as well as the big milestones. The expectations in their home weren't about pressure. They were about believing their daughters were capable of something meaningful. From a young age, Samantha seemed to know she wanted more for herself. She planned ahead, she set goals, she paid attention to details. Friends described her as thoughtful and organized. The kind of person who kept track of deadlines, who reminded others about plans, who showed up when she said she would. Even in college, when so many people are still figuring out who they are, Sami had a clear sense of where she was headed. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She was building a future, step by step, and she was only weeks away from taking the next one. Samantha went to Robbinsville High School, where she did well in class and built friendships that didn't fade after graduation. She wasn't just one type of person. She could be focused and serious when she needed to be, but she was also easy to talk to. Warm. The kind of person who made you feel heard. She laughed easily. She paid attention when people spoke. She showed up for the people in her life. When it came time to choose a college, Samantha made a decision that meant leaving New Jersey and heading south. She enrolled at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, hundreds of miles from home. For Sami, that move meant independence. It was her chance to build something on her own. At USC, she majored in political science. She joined Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and built a new circle of friends. And from early on, she was clear about what she wanted. She planned to become a lawyer. It wasn't just something she said in passing. She treated it like a goal with steps attached. She studied seriously. She kept her grades where they needed to be. She understood that law school wasn't automatic. You had to earn it. By her senior year, that effort paid off. Samantha had secured a full scholarship to Drexel University's Thomas R. Klein School of Law. Law school was set to begin in just a few months. She was scheduled to graduate from the University of South Carolina in May 2019. Only weeks after the night she disappeared. She was 21 years old, right at the point where all the work starts to turn into something real. Outside the classroom, she had a full college life. She went out with friends. She showed up to events. She balanced responsibilities with fun the way most students try to do. She wasn't withdrawn or cut off from people. She was connected. Her roommates knew her habits. Her family talked to her often. There was a rhythm to her days. Class, friends, studying, plans for the future. That's part of why March 28, 2019 stood out so quickly. Samantha didn't slowly drift out of contact. She disappeared in the middle of a life that was steady and moving forward. There were no signs she was in trouble, no threats, no warning messages. no indication that someone had singled her out. In the days leading up to that night, nothing about her behavior suggested that her path was about to cross with someone capable of violence. She was doing what most college students do, making plans, meeting friends, thinking about the next thing on her calendar. She had no reason to believe that one small decision, requesting a ride home, would put her in the path of someone she had never met, someone who had already made up his mind about what he was going to do. On the night of March 28, 2019, Sammy left her apartment and headed to 5 Points with friends. The plan was simple: go out for a while, unwind, then head home. At some point that night, a man driving a black Chevrolet Impala entered the same area. Before the night was over, their paths would cross. Thursday, March 28th, felt like a typical spring night in Columbia, South Carolina. Classes were still in session at the University of South Carolina, but the semester was winding down. For seniors like Samantha, everything felt close. Graduation, goodbyes, the next chapter. There's a different kind of energy during that time. People are finishing assignments, talking about moving, making summer plans. The future starts to feel less abstract and more immediate. That evening, Samantha met up with friends in 5 Points, one of the busiest nightlife areas near campus. It's just a few minutes from the university, lined with bars, restaurants, and music spots. On most nights, especially in the spring, it's full of students. It wasn't unusual for her to be there. She knew the area. She'd been there before. She wasn't reckless, just social, comfortable in a place that felt familiar. She and her friends moved from spot to spot, talking, laughing, stretching out the night the way college students do when they don't have to be up early the next morning. Nothing about her behavior stood out. Nothing suggested this night would end any differently than the others. As it got later and the early morning hours crept in, Sami decided it was time to head home. She wasn't going to drive. Instead, she reached for her phone and did what so many people do without thinking twice. She opened the Uber app and requested a ride to her off-campus apartment. Cameras along Hardin Street later showed Samantha standing outside, waiting. She was by herself, looking down at her phone, likely checking the app for updates and watching for the car that matched the details on her screen. Around her, traffic continued to move. Some cars slowed to pick up passengers. Others rolled past without stopping. It looked like any other busy night in 5 Points. And for a few more moments, that's exactly what it was. At around 2:17 a.m., a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up near where Samantha was standing. Sammy stepped forward. She opened the front passenger door and got in. The whole thing took seconds. There was no visible pause, no sign of hesitation, no struggle. The door shut. The car pulled away. That was the last confirmed sighting of Samantha Josephson alive. What she couldn't have known in that moment was that the car she entered was not the Uber she had requested. The actual Uber driver matched to her ride was nearby, but she never made it to that vehicle. Instead, she got into a car driven by 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland. Rowland was not a licensed rideshare driver. He wasn't authorized to pick anyone up. According to investigators, he had been driving through the 5 Points area in the early morning hours, an area full of students requesting rides home. A black sedan in that environment didn't draw attention. It fit in. From the outside, there were no flashing warning signs. Nothing that would have clearly told Samantha this wasn't her ride. Within minutes of her getting into the car, her phone activity stopped. The digital trail that had been active just moments earlier went silent. What happened after that took place away from security cameras. There's no footage showing the drive, no public recording of what was said inside that car. By the time her friends realized she hadn't made it home, hours had passed. And by the time investigators were able to identify the black Impala seen on surveillance video, the distance between where Samantha was last seen and where she would eventually be found had grown into something devastating. After that car left Hardin Street, she wasn't heading home. She was with someone whose actions would only come into focus later, as investigators began uncovering the evidence he left behind. When law enforcement started searching for the black Chevrolet Impala captured on camera, they weren't just tracking down a vehicle. They were trying to find the last person who saw Samantha alive. And the break in the case came faster than anyone expected. Using traffic cameras, nearby surveillance footage, and vehicle registration records, investigators were able to track down the black Chevy Impala. It was registered to a 24-year-old man named Nathaniel Rowland. He lived in the Columbia area. As far as anyone could tell, he had no connection to Samantha. They didn't know each other. There was no shared history, no mutual friends, nothing tying their lives together. Once detectives identified him as the owner of the car, they moved quickly. Within hours, they found Rowland. He was still driving the Impala. Officers pulled him over on March 29, 2019, less than 24 hours after Samantha was last seen getting into that vehicle. But the car wasn't just sitting there like an empty lead in a case. When investigators started looking inside, things immediately felt wrong. The interior showed signs that something had happened. It wasn't subtle. Later forensic testing confirmed what they were beginning to suspect in that moment. Samantha's blood was inside the car. Her phone was there too. He hadn't thrown it away. He hadn't ditched it somewhere along the road. It was still with him. At that point, this wasn't just a theory built on timelines and camera footage. This was physical evidence. It placed Samantha inside that vehicle, and it showed that she had been hurt there. There was another detail officers noticed. The child safety locks on the passenger doors were switched on. That meant anyone sitting inside couldn't open the doors from within. For investigators, that detail changed the way they looked at everything. Because if Samantha realized she was in danger after getting inside, getting out may not have been an option. As the forensic work continued, the picture became clearer and heavier. Samantha's blood wasn't found in just one isolated spot. It appeared on multiple surfaces inside the car, suggesting she had been injured while still there. DNA taken from beneath her fingernails later matched Rowland. She fought him. She didn't go quietly. She tried to protect herself. Detectives looked into Rowland's background. They were trying to understand why this happened. Was Samantha targeted specifically? Had he followed her? There was no evidence that they knew each other. No prior contact. Nothing connecting them before that night. What the evidence did suggest was opportunity and planning. He had been driving around an area where people regularly requested rides. He positioned himself in a way that allowed him to intercept someone expecting a car. While law enforcement worked behind the scenes, the community was trying to make sense of it all. Students at the University of South Carolina started looking at rideshare apps differently. So did their parents. Something that had felt routine, tapping a button and getting into a car, suddenly felt uncertain. Local news stations covered the story nonstop. National outlets picked it up. Conversations about rideshare safety spread quickly, not just in Columbia, but across the country. People began asking harder questions about verification, accountability, and how easily trust can be exploited. At the center of all of it were Samantha's parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson. They had traveled from New Jersey to Columbia the moment they realized something was wrong. Now they were standing in a city that had become the last place their daughter was seen alive. They spoke publicly, even while carrying a level of grief most people can't imagine. They asked students to double-check license plates, to ask drivers their names first, to slow down and be certain before getting into a car. They were trying to turn their loss into something that might protect someone else. Behind the scenes, investigators continued building the timeline. Forensic reports, phone data, surveillance footage, each piece added more detail to Samantha's final hours. The picture that formed was precise and difficult to absorb. It showed how long she had been in that car. It showed the route. It showed the struggle. And even with Rowland under arrest, the work wasn't finished. Every file had to be reviewed, every lab result confirmed, every second accounted for, from the moment Samantha left 5 Points to the discovery of her body in Clarendon County. As detectives organized the evidence, it became clear that Rowland had left behind a trail. Digital records, physical evidence, witness accounts. It all pointed in the same direction, forming the backbone of what prosecutors would later present in court. Still, one question hung in the background for so many people watching this case unfold. How did something so ordinary, calling for a ride home, end this way? And was there any point where it could have been stopped? Those questions followed the case into the courtroom. Prosecutors laid out the timeline in detail: Samantha's movements, the forensic findings, the data from both phones, and the evidence tying Nathaniel Rowland to every critical moment. But the trial wasn't just about proving what happened. It also forced a broader conversation about safety, trust, and how quickly a single decision can alter the course of a life. After months of investigation, the story that began in the early hours of March 29, 2019, shifted from the streets of Columbia to the courtrooms of South Carolina. The evidence was thorough, detailed, and heartbreaking. Nathaniel Rowland had lured Samantha Josephson into his black Chevrolet Impala under false pretenses, driven her to a remote location, and killed her. The trial wasn't just about recounting what happened. It became a careful reconstruction of Samantha's final hours, built piece by piece from surveillance footage, digital records, forensic evidence, and witness testimony. Prosecutors focused on the Impala as the central piece of the case, a car that started out as a normal rideshare and ended up as the place where her life was taken. Her blood and DNA connected Rowland directly to the crime. The phone recovered from the car confirmed the timeline and backed up everything investigators had pieced together. Friends who had last seen Samantha in 5 Points testified about her careful, responsible nature. They described how she had followed all the right steps, verifying her ride, staying aware of her surroundings, and separating from her friends at the expected time. These details highlighted the cruel calculation behind Rowland's actions. Samantha had trusted the system, and he had taken advantage of that trust. The defense tried to claim the crime wasn't planned, but the evidence told a different story. Rowland's digital activity, the route he took, and the engaged child safety locks inside the Impala all pointed to premeditation. The jury saw how he had isolated Samantha, the struggle she endured inside the car, and the violent way he ended her life. By the end of the trial, prosecutors had painted a picture not just of a murderer, but of a predator, someone who used planning, opportunity, and deception to commit a terrible act. In December 2021, Nathaniel Rowland was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. The verdict brought legal closure, but the emotional wounds for Samantha's family and community would never fully heal. For Seymour and Maurice Josephson, justice came with a heavy weight. The man responsible for their daughter's death had been convicted, but Samantha wasn't coming back. In interviews, they spoke about her warmth, her sense of humor, and the bright future that was taken from them. They also shared a message of caution, especially around rideshare services, hoping that other families might be spared the heartbreak they endured. Sydney added, "My sister was always silly and goofy, the life of the party. She loved making people smile. She cared so deeply about everyone close to her. She'd do anything for them." Marcy added, "Samantha was a little bit of everything. Sensitive, but also the class clown. She had dreams. She wanted to be a lawyer one day, and we all knew it." Samantha's story didn't just touch her family. It changed the way communities think about safety. Her death inspired new laws in several states requiring rideshare vehicles to display clear identification. Safety campaigns began urging passengers to verify drivers and cars before getting in. Conversations about digital safety, trust, and vigilance were shaped by her experience, and her story became a catalyst for broader awareness. Still, even with the conviction and the policy changes, some questions lingered. Why had Rowland been in that area that night? Had he taken advantage of others before? And how could systems meant to protect people fail so quickly? Samantha Josephson's case is more than a true crime story. It's a reflection on how fragile safety can be, how a single choice can have devastating consequences, and how a family's grief can turn into advocacy. Her life and her death serve as a reminder. Even in a world full of technology and safety systems, awareness, care, and vigilance are essential. Tragedy can happen in an instant, and trust can be broken in the blink of an eye. Samantha's story ended in loss, but it continues through every step taken to make sure others never face the same fate. Thank you for watching Murder Ledger. We explore real cases, unanswered questions, and the details that refuse to fade. If these stories matter to you, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments.